I'm not going to talk about myself too much, I hope, but what I do want to talk about today is the idea of being uncommon. And before we delve into things that are uncommon, I want us to begin by thinking about what is uncommon and why. Commonness and uncommonness are really just notions of what society defines and expects of us, right? Something that is common in one place may be uncommon in another. We were talking about this just earlier today. My haircut is considered quite radical in some parts, but in my neighborhood in Bangalore, it's cool. Nobody bats an eyelid, right? So what is uncommon is really just defined by the people around us. Equally, when I finished school and chose not to study the sciences, that was an uncommon decision. But when I moved to the UK and was doing a humanities degree, it was the most normal thing in the world. Because to be a doctor or engineer is not necessarily the social expectation elsewhere. I also wanted to say, you saw the previous slide about normal is a curve, right? When we think about normalness on a graph, for example, normalness is a bell curve. It is not defined by one single point. It is a diversity of points, a range of values, right? Commonness is therefore defined by either a majority of people or those that hold power in a given society or community. Normal doesn't describe, like I said, a single data point, but a pattern of diversity. What I did want to talk about, though, was about identity and how we decide who is normal and who is not. Identity politics is complicated, is maybe not the best way to define ourselves in the world. However, it is the best framework that we have. All of us in this, or many of us in this room are women. We think about what it is to be a woman, and we think about that often, right? You're aware on a day-to-day basis of your gender identity, how it makes you feel in the public space, how it makes you feel in the world. Have you considered your race? Do you think about brownness? Not really, no? All of us are brown only, right? So it doesn't make that big a difference. Until suddenly you're in a space where that is uncommon. Actually, we need to reflect on our privileges and on the way we can use our endowment and give back to the communities that we are part of. Many of us are, of course, very lucky to be in an institution like this, having education like this. So what can we then do to give back to those who are not in those positions? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is not the only Dalit person who was not allowed to drink water at his school, right? There are Dalit, Bahujan, and Adivasi people across this country who are still in that set of circumstances. We become aware of our identity far more when we are marginalized. It's very easy to be in a position of privilege and to then not have to think about it until you're in a different place where your uncommonness is not so acceptable. We've heard from an incredible range of people today who are awe-inspiring in their stories and in their work, and their uncommonness is admired. Uncommonness is not always admired, though, right? It's often shamed, it's often judged, it's often frowned upon. So what can we then do if we think that the things that are uncommon about us are not the things that people are proud of? I think what is crucial there is us expanding our definition of what then is normal. It's not just Western pop culture that is now so much more inclusive of female protagonists, of LGBT plus heroes, of queer people and trans people in cinemas and TV shows, right? It's also super deluxe. It's also Nachathiram Nagargirudhu, right? It's also our pop culture here in South India that is bringing more stories to the forefront. And that expands our definition of what is normal. As we expand that definition of what is normal, more people who were maybe ashamed of what their uncommonness was are empowered and begin to feel more confident to bring their uncommonness into the open, to talk about the things that make them different a bit more confidently. And that's why representation is key. Really, really important. Normalness is this series of steps, this escalator in life that people expect us to all follow blindly without thinking, without pausing, without reflecting. So that image that you saw by mistake is called the relationship escalator. When you Google the relationship escalator, this is the result that you get. As you can see, it's quite American. I amended it slightly. And this is a version that I think fits the expectations that many of us may have heard or just accepted as part of our lives. We finish school, we do an engineering degree or a medical degree, and then you do an MBA, you come to an amazing institution like this. You're lucky if you get to find your spouse by yourself. You then get married, you keep getting promoted. We were talking about making money, we were talking about CTCs. You buy a car, you buy a house, you have a children, and then you put them through the same cycle. There's nothing wrong with this, okay? This has worked. Many of us are very happy, many of our families are very happy, many of us have been delighted to do some of these steps. The problem is when this is the only norm, right? So what I'm here to talk about is just to say, I occupy many identities of privilege, and coming from the family that I come from, a very academic family, I was given the freedom to make academic choices. So it was okay if I didn't do science. It was okay if in first standard I wanted to drop out of Bharatanatyam and classical singing because I just didn't feel like it was me. It was okay for me to then choose painting and writing instead as my hobbies because those were what I enjoyed. When I wanted to study politics and history, nobody bat an eyelid. When I wanted to do a master's on education history, that was cool too. I have worked in the social sector for 5 years, and I've recently chosen to quit my job, to take a bit of a break and focus on my poetry full time. I'm allowed to do this because I'm in a position where nobody is telling me anymore what is okay for me to do and not to do. But all of that independence and freedom and choice and financial independence that came of this 5 years of working is all a result of that privilege, right? What I want to recommend that we all do today is pause, think about where we are on this escalator, and think about if that's where we want to be. It might be, in which case, wonderful. If you have not had to pause and think about your position on this escalator, that's great, because it means that nothing has been a tremendous jolt or offered you sort of a real obstacle that you felt, oh, I got to reflect on everything and run away. No. That's great if that's been the case. But even if we are comfortable and even if we are happy, it's wonderful to have agency in our choices and to choose them actively and to get to decide where we want to be on this, to pause, to think about, okay, maybe I don't want to do this now. Maybe I don't want to do this at all. Maybe I just want to stop, take a break, and then come back and get back on the escalator. We are all uncommon, and I just want us to remember that that uncommonness can always be a good thing, whether we want to show it to others or not. So think about where you are on this escalator. Pause, take a breath, get back on it if you want to. If you don't want to, go and build your own. Thanks.